All right, it is about 1:45 p.m. on Sunday, August 2nd. It's a balmy 71 degrees out here right now. I've been out here, well, for about 5 hours now, and it is time to come into the greenhouse. I thought I would bring you all along. We are going to be doing some planting. If you've been following along, you'll remember a couple days ago we set up a bunch of pots of soil to start doing the fall planting. I did a little bit of it yesterday. I planted some Swiss chard, some leeks, and some cabbage. And so we're going to continue on that. I'm looking at the onions we planted last week, and they're starting to poke their pretty little heads up through. So those things are going well. Yeah, I'm just checking things out in the greenhouse to see what is getting watered and what is not. My basil looks good. We trimmed it up a couple days ago. It'll be due for another trim here very shortly. Paradoxically, I still struggle with this. I know new gardeners struggle with this. You have this plant that you grew and you're excited about it and you don't want to damage it. But realistically, you need to prune more aggressively than you are. Probably that's always true for me. I kind of think, oh, this is pretty. I don't want to mess with it. But by trimming it down, you force growth back down. You make the roots stronger. Everything benefits from it. The one thing that I know this year I'm not doing enough that I need to do more of is pruning my tomatoes. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on. I tend to over plant tomatoes because they're good to have in mass when we start preserving them. And sometimes I don't put as much attention on the plant as I need to. But that's okay. That's part of the stage that I'm at right now. I'm devoting more of my time, oftentimes, to construction or to getting systems in place with the hope that as things settle down, I'll have more time to devote. Okay, so let's look and see. I have a box of seeds. I have a big seed vault that I keep inside, and I have a little one that I bring out to the greenhouse. Really, when they're out here, we just want to keep them from light and heat and water and all that kind of stuff. The heat's not as bad as the others. But okay, so I'm looking through here. Some kale. Where's my kale? There's broccoli. We're going to plant some broccoli. That's good. Carrots need to be planted directly in the ground. I can plant a little more cabbage. There's some cauliflower. We can do that. And kale. We can do some more onions. I don't know if I'm going to get there. Parsnips and radishes need to go directly in the ground, so we're not going to mess with those. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing these pots over here to my potting chamber and start putting stuff in. Let's bring you 6. Because my trays are 3 pots, 3 4-inch pots wide, I tend to plant in multiples of 3. That helps me keep track of what's growing and what's not. Okay, today or yesterday, depending on how you count, is a special day on the calendar, and this is on. We're going to get there in a second. On the English calendar, this day is Lammas or Loafmas. Lammas is the Old English for Loafmas. That is an important day on the agrarian and liturgical calendar. So a little bit of background. I grew up in a very kind of fundamentalist, conservative, religious tradition, and I lost my faith in that as a young adult, probably about 20 years ago, and navigated my way through the world. I've always been interested in spirituality and religion, and I've studied a lot of religion, especially Eastern religion and uh, Christian sects and divisions and philosophies and stuff, just naturally being from the West. But I've never been able to find a religion that spoke to me in a matter of like truth or belief. And part of that is because once I sort of abandoned my religion, I took to a higher standard. Just having faith in something is not good enough. This is not a criticism of anybody's religious belief. This is about me. And so, uh, but I realized early on that most of the holidays that we celebrate in the United States are either old religiously derived ones like Easter and Christmas, but they've become very secularized, or they're just sort of weird civic holidays like Labor Day and Memorial Day, and things that don't have a lot of connection or meaning for us in the world. So part of my journey of studying and just natural curiosity is I'm interested in the way our ancestors did things, and this is particularly true for what I'm doing here in terms of a permaculture sort of thing. I'm often very curious as to how things were done before. For example, we're trying to achieve sustainability, but our ancestors farming for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years on the same plot had to develop methods of sustainability. So without understanding sort of the chemical or biological elements behind, they discovered that if they left fields fallow and planted clover or another nitrogen fixer without understanding what nitrogen was or what it meant to nitrogen fix, they just sort of stumbled on it. And then they discovered that if they rotated their animals through fields that they planted, that they get better crops. So they discovered, without understanding the science behind it, a lot of the principles underneath those things. Then when we became more chemically focused in terms of agriculture in the 20th century in particular, we sort of forgot some of those things because we weren't practicing them. And now we're trying to rediscover those things. But anyway, I was looking for my own sense of place and spirituality, as well as trying to get a rhythm of life. And I spent a lot of time over the last, I would say, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, kind of looking at different holidays. And, of course, the term holiday or holiday derives from the term holy day. And I was looking at what my ancestors, my direct line ancestors, and did, and in particular those who are English speaking. So I really don't hold any kind of genetic identity myself. Like if you hear me say the word ancestors, I might be talking about the Chinese or Indian or Sub-African farmers just as well as I'd be talking about the European ones. I don't hold racial or genealogical identity. That doesn't mean anything to me. I see human beings as kind of all being part of the same species and family. But I did want to understand where these things came from, so I spent a couple of years studying out the origin of different holidays from my cultural derivation, um, meaning that America is an English-speaking culture, and much of what we do is based on that sort of British system. Now, of course, in England, they had a huge influence from the Scandinavians, particularly the Danes. So when you're talking about English history, you're automatically grabbing a lot of Scandinavian and Northern European traditions. And if you look at like German and Eastern European traditions, they come from the same family. So I tend to gravitate towards the English speaking ones, not because they're superior, but that's sort of where my language and culture derived from. But the holidays that people use traditionally were one of two things. They were either liturgical, meaning they mark certain days that the church recognized things and would go through a cycle of teaching church teachings to its membership. Okay, we're writing down here cauliflower. I just planted 6 cauliflowers. F-L-O-W-E-R. So they were either liturgical, the holidays, or they were agrarian, and oftentimes they were both. So there were days that people could mark and see when certain things were supposed to happen. Now you have to remember that for most of human history, most humans were illiterate, and that sounds worse than it is. It just literature or writing was not really a technological advancement that was necessary or needed by most human beings for the first, I don't know, up until say 300 or 400 or 500 years ago. And today the numbers of people who really are functionally illiterate are still vast, and that speaks more to the fact that in their day-to-day lives they don't necessarily need to know how to read. Now you and I both know that if they knew how to read and read better, they could probably better their position in life, but that's a topic for another day. So assuming that most of our ancestors were not um, illiterate and they didn't have things like calendars printed on the wall, they had to look for other markers. So the easiest and oldest marker that is universal. Of course, it becomes less so when you're equatorial, because it kind of doesn't matter. But as you move away from the equator, you'll mark the solstice as the number one marker. That's the easiest one for human beings to glom onto. So as the sun spins around the earth and the earth wobbles, you have that point where you have the shortest days and then the longest days. So the winter equinox happens on December 21st, or I mean the winter solstice, and the summer solstice happens on about June 21st, and it kind of bounces around a little bit, but it's somewhere around that day. Um, so you can actually start tracking as the sun descends in the sky, or descends in the horizon, and then it'll start to rise again. So those are markers that an observant human being can see, and we see them marked all over. In ancient Indian stone ruins all around the globe, we see markers that are carved into stone and otherwise placed in the ground that show an awareness of the solstices. Then halfway between the solstice is the equinox. So that happens about March 21st, about September 21st, and that's when it will even out. So if you say, oh, the December 21st is the day when there's the least amount of light in the day and the greatest amount of darkness, that those two, the light and darkness, will be basically equal on the equinox on the 21st, and then you'll have the longest day on June 21st. So that cycle, that 4 parts of the year, were extremely important days, and almost every culture, again, that's non-equatorial, will mark them or have holidays that are very close to them. Some holidays are more based on a lunar calendar than a solar calendar, and again, that's a topic for another day. But then what you have is you've now partitioned the year into 4, the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices. Well, if you cut that time in half, the day that's halfway between the equinox and the solstice, you have what is commonly referred to as the cross quarters. And these days are extremely important, both liturgically and from a agrarian perspective. Matter of fact, they might be some of the most important days to mark the agrarian calendar. So if we start, so today being August 2nd, we are halfway between the summer solstice on June 21st and the fall equinox, which would be September 21st. So this day is the cross quarter, and that is the day of Lammas. Now, Lammas is a shortened form or an Old English form of Loafmas. Mass, the same word in Christmas, so emphasizing that Christian sort of liturgical function that happens. And this day marks traditionally in an English agrarian schedule when the first harvest came in, or when the wheat was brought in. Generally, now we've been breeding and genetically altering and that sort of stuff, crops for well, we're always doing it. So sometimes these old dates don't match very much, but in a traditional perspective, this is when you would be expected to harvest the wheat, and which I think is fascinating because this celebrates the first harvest. This is the first big harvest is celebrated on Lammas, on Loafmas, and really going around the wheat harvest. But because wheat for our English ancestors would have been the most important cash crop, or the what most of the people got most of their calories from. So it was an extremely important harvest for everybody, whether you were on a farm or not. And it's telling also. One of the things that is has been a challenge, or you have to work on as you try to live this sort of lifestyle, is actually eating food in season. So what this holiday did is, because it was a time when one gave bread offerings to the church, so it was a reminder that you needed to use up all of your wheat stores from the previous year. So as you go throughout the year, you're kind of watching and your stores. You don't want to go hungry, so you don't want to eat everything, and come March, suddenly you have nothing left to eat. That's a bad thing. So this is a reminder saying, hey, the year is over. It's time to bring in new wheat. Go ahead and use up all the rest that you have. So that's why it corresponds to um, giving bread offerings to the church, because it's a reminder to you viscerally that, hey, the old wheat is gone. It's time to bring in the new wheat. So you would definitely want to use up what's languishing in your stores, and that's kind of what this day is about. So for us, tracking to this marks when you really move into a food processing mode. As a matter of fact, yesterday afternoon, after we had our chat, one of the things I went out and did is I harvested some blackberries. The blackberries are on right now, so I picked. A friend and I went out and we picked about I don't know, 2 gallons of blackberries. Which, if my energy holds up for today, I might be making some blackberry jam. Maybe I should have a contest, and whoever sends me the most clever dad joke gets sent a jar of my blackberry jam. So let's see. Yeah, so this is an important day, and it's an important day for understanding how things work. So for me, as I'm planning out my year, which includes like vacations and time off work, I know that I'm entering into the busy phase. This time, August, September, October are by far and away the busiest time on the farm, because everything's starting to really come due, which is one of the reasons you want to plant berries and other things that come online before this period, because I've got lots of apples on the ground right now from my big apple tree, um, and a lot of them, that's fine. It will be what it will be. All right, I just put in some 6 plants of broccoli, so I'm making my tag for broccoli, OLI. Um, but if you can space out when you're harvesting different things and what you're planting, then first of all, you can eat out of the gardens year round. You're not having to preserve as much, than eat out of bottles or cans. And then secondly, you're spacing out the amount of work you do as you move along throughout the year. Because if you don't plan things right, you can find yourself suddenly overwhelmed and underwater, and really frustrated because you can't get done everything that you want to do. Improve. Let's see. I've got several kales here. This says overwintering type. That's what we want. Small gardens. Early spring and late fall kale. All right, so we've got, let's see here. I've got improved dwarf Siberian and winter boar. We're going to plant these. I'm going to plant 6 pots of each. Okay, so getting that out there, getting that ready. So yeah, that's part of the balancing act, and the unfortunate thing, or the scary thing, is that takes time to figure out. And I think that's another reason that a lot of people who try to homestead or start their own permaculture operation really get kind of burned out, because they don't have enough experience, which is fully expected. That's not like any kind of negative thing, to really space things out and understand the work. But my family knows, if they say, "Oh, let's do this in August," or "Let's do this in September," I'm like, I can't do anything during those time periods. That is not a time that I can get away, because there's always stuff that needs to be harvested, always stuff that needs to be brought in, always stuff that needs to be processed. And then the goal kind of being, when you hit November 1st, which is again, one of the cross quarters. So the next cross quarter, would be that Halloween time period. That's when I want to be done with all this stuff. So I know I've kind of brought the harvest in, and my food preservation times are sort of up, that we've moved on to the next thing. Okay, so I've got those 6 over there. And we just planted the dwarf Siberian kale. All right, let's write that down. Dwarf Siberian kale. Okay, so that's been a big motivator for me, is to try to get the holidays and the celebrations that line up with my agrarian schedule, so that they have meaning. So if I go back to where I started here, the holidays that I grew up celebrating, especially after I lost a religious paradigm, didn't have much meaning to me. They were fun. I like Christmas time and all the food and pageantry and music and decorations and lights, and all that's great. I didn't lose any interest in that, even though I sort of lost my kind of fundamentalist belief in Christianity that way. Those things can be enjoyed by everybody, but I wanted to have a life that I move through with meaning. And I think that's kind of a fundamental principle of permaculture, is it not? That if we're living with the agriculture, it's impacting our lives, and it's not just something that is separated from us. It is something that speaks to us, and has real meaning. Okay, so I think that's what I want to say on that topic. We'll talk about more of these holidays that come along. Um, and what we do to recognize them. Uh, Typically this year, we have always had a kind of a fire pit sort of barbecue, throw a multi-family intergenerational party, but we're not doing one this weekend. I think it's just hot and we're tired, and there's other things going on, so it's just Kimmy and I today. And I think we're gonna go get dressed here in a little bit and head off to a winery, to go do a wine tasting. So that's going to be my Loafmas holiday. I hope it's a good one for you, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.